Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome in. It's nice to see so many people getting in here early, right at the top of the show. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up on time. Nice to have you here. Hello, everybody. My name is Nick Mitchell. I'm here with Book Passage Live. And hello, and welcome to another show. We here at the bookstore, and many of us in our homes now, are very excited to bring to you some of the best authors and conversations that you can find out there on the internet. If you've seen one of these events before, well then, welcome back. We're glad to have you again. But if you are new here, then Book Passage is an independently run bookstore out of the San Francisco Bay Area and Corte Madera and the San Francisco Ferry Building. And back when crowds weren't quite so dangerous for us to be in, we hosted book talks just like these at all of our bookstores. As we are now streaming on YouTube, and I think we'll continue to do so, at least in some capacity in the future, please consider subscribing by clicking the subscribe button below. And if you want to know every time that we go live, you can click the notifications bell. Just click to right next to it, and that will let you know whenever we turn the live stream on or whenever we post a pre-recorded author interview, as we do from time to time. If you'd just like to check out our events on our website, you can do so by going to bookpassage.com/event, and that'll bring you to a calendar that lets you know everything out as far as we know our own events. If you would like to check out tonight's book, which is Death in Her Hands, or anything else that gets mentioned here tonight, you can check it out at bookpassage.com. I'll put a link to tonight's book in there, but you can just navigate using the search bar above that thing to any of the books that are mentioned. Lastly, if you have any questions for tonight's speakers, please write them in the YouTube chat just to the right of the screen or just below it, depending on what viewing mode you're in. They don't always answer all of the questions, but I will do my best to make sure that all of them make it from the YouTube chat to our personal and internal chat in the Zoom call that we're in, and we'll do our best to get through all of them. Even if we don't, thank you for asking them, and thank you for all of the comments that you make on the book, particularly the positive ones. We do share them with the authors afterwards. And now let me introduce our authors. Ottessa Moshfegh, author of our book today, Death in Her Hands, is also the author of New York Times bestseller My Year of Rest and Relaxation, the author of New York Times Book Review Notable Book of the Year, Homesick for Another World. She is the author of Eileen, which was shortlisted for the National Book Critics Circle Award and the Man Booker Prize, and won the Hemingway Prize for debut fiction. She is also the author of McGlue, which won the Fence Modern Prize in Prose and the Believer Book Award. In conversation tonight, we have Rita Bullwinkel, author of the story collection of Belly Up, which won the 2018 Believer Book Award. Bullwinkel's writing has been published in Tin House, The White Review, Conjunctions, Bomb, Vice, Noon. She's the recipient of grants and fellowships from McDowell, Brown University, Vanderbilt University, and many more. Both her fiction and translations have been nominated for Pushcart Prizes. She is an editor at large for McSweeney's and a contributing editor for Noon. She lives in San Francisco, teaches at the California College for the Arts, and we are very lucky to have her here with us today. Honestly, we're lucky to have both of our authors here with us today. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. One last time, if you have any questions, please write them in the chat so we can get them to our authors. Everybody likes answering questions. But let me get out of the way, pass the show off to Ottessa and Rita. Welcome.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks, Rita, and hi, everybody. We decided that we would start off with a reading from Death in Her Hands, which just came out in paperback, which is the reason for this event. And I guess I don't really need to say anything about the book because we're about to talk about it, and I'm going to read from the opening. Yeah, I'm just going to read from chapter 1. And I'll say this. The book begins in italics that signifies that we are reading a different text from the rest of the book. And in the beginning, there's a note that the protagonist finds, and that note is the opening of chapter 1. Her name was Magda. Nobody will ever know who killed her. It wasn't me. Here is her dead body. So that's the note. But there was no body, no blood stain, no tangle of hair caught on the coarse fallen branches, no red wool scarf damp with morning dew festooned across the bushes. There was just the note on the ground, rustling at my feet in the soft May wind. I happened upon it on my dawn walk through the birch woods with my dog, Charlie. I'd discovered the path the previous spring, just after Charlie and I had moved to Levant. We'd worn it down all spring, summer, and fall, but abandoned it during winter. The slim white trees had been nearly invisible against the snow. On foggy mornings, the birches completely disappeared in the mist. Since the thaw, Charlie had been waking me up every morning at daybreak. We'd cross the dirt road and trudge up the slow rise and fall of a little hill and weave our way back and forth through the birches. That morning, when I found the note laid flat on the path, we'd made it about a mile into the woods. Charlie did not slow or tilt his head or even lower his nose to the ground to sniff. It seemed very odd to me that he'd just ignore it. My Charlie, who once broke off his leash and ran across the freeway to fetch a dead bird. So strong was his instinct to ferret out the dead. No, he didn't give the note a second glance. Little black rocks pinned the note down to the ground, each placed carefully on the top on the page in the top margin and along the bottom. I bent down to read it again. Under my hands, the earth was almost warm, shy, pale grass poking up here and there in the crumbly black dirt, the sun just starting to brighten in hue from silver to yellow. Her name was Magda. It was a joke, I thought, a prank, a ruse. Somebody was playing games. That was my initial impression. Isn't it sweet to look back at how my mind jumped to the most innocuous conclusion? That after so many years, at 72, my imagination was still so naive. Experience should have taught me that first impressions are often misleading. Kneeling down in the dirt, I considered the details. The paper was a page from a lined spiral notebook, its perforated edge broken cleanly, no straggly bits from where it had been torn out. Careful, small printed letters in blue ballpoint pen. It was hard to decipher much from the penmanship, and that seemed deliberate. It was the kind of neat, impersonal printing you'd use when making a sign for a yard sale or filling out a form at the dentist. Wise, I thought, smart. Whoever had written the note understood that by masking one's peculiarities, one invokes authority. There's nothing as imposing as anonymity. But the words themselves, when I spoke them aloud, seemed witty, a rare quality in Levant, where most people were blue collar and dull. I read the note again and almost chuckled over that penultimate line. It wasn't me. Of course it wasn't. If not a prank, the note could have been the beginning of a story tossed out as a false start, a bad opening. I could understand the hesitation. It's a rather dark, damning way to begin a story, the pronouncement of a mystery whose investigation is futile. Nobody will ever know who killed her. The story is over just as it's begun. Was futility a subject worthy of exploration? The note certainly didn't promise any happy ending. Here is her dead body. Surely there was more to say. Where was Magda? Was it so hard to come up with a description of her corpse tangled in the brush under a fallen tree, her face sunken into the soft black dirt, her hands hog-tied behind her back, the blood from her stab wounds leaching into the ground? How hard was it to imagine a small golden locket glinting between sodden birch leaves, the chain broken and dashed through the new tender hairy grass? The locket could contain photos of a young gap-toothed child on one side, Magda at age 5, and a man in a military hat on the other, her father, I'd guess. Or maybe hog-tied would be a bit too strong. Maybe stab wounds were too graphic too soon. Perhaps the killer simply positioned her arms behind her back so they wouldn't stick out from under the rotting branches and catch somebody's eye. The pale skin of Magda's hands would stand out against the dark ground, like the white paper on the path, I imagined. It seemed better to begin with gentler descriptions. I could write the book myself if I had the discipline, if I thought anyone might read it. Okay, I think I'll stop there.
Such a joy to hear you read that beginning, Ottessa. So something I found so compelling about Vesta was her desire to make something, to make narrative. Why is she drawn to making narrative?
That's a good question. I think she's drawn to making narrative because she's been bored her entire life,
Mhm.
and she's utterly isolated, and all she has is her own mind. And in narrating, I think she finds like a way to use her mind and occupy her mind space in a way that's empowering and creative and somehow transformative. And I think that she, as a woman who is approaching the end of her life, is kind of desperate to have a story to tell, or to imagine a story that could be hers or Magda's, that is somehow like worthy of having occupied a life. Yeah.
Something else I found so interesting about her that maybe shifted over the course of the book, or maybe she changed her mind about. I love when she contradicts herself from passage to passage. Is in the beginning section, she recollects when she adopts her dog Charlie and describes lying to the adoption agency. They ask her to sign a document saying that she will have Charlie, her dog, neutered.
Mhm.
And she knows when she's signing the document she's not going to do it. And she describes feeling like anxious and blushed. And then later on, in one of my favorite sections of the book, the Ask Jeeves like internet section, she reflects that lying is something that is like necessary to have for oneself. I think she talks about it as something having to do with a way you individuate yourself from others. So yeah, I'm curious to know more about how you understand Vespa's relationship to lying, and also just in general what its function might be in our lives.
Well, I mean, like storytelling is kind of lying. I mean, no,
Yeah.
they're not the same, but there's significant overlap because you're inventing something for a specific reason, and it's usually self-interested. Like if we're
Right.
telling a story, it's because we want an audience to appreciate our story for whatever reason we want to tell it. And if you're lying, you're probably doing it to your own advantage, right? Like we don't usually lie uh, because it's going to get us in trouble, like the lie itself. Although I don't know.
Mhm.
I mean, there's plenty of self-sabotage. But I do think that there's I mean, I hate when I have to lie. And I think it might be because I'm a really good liar. And it makes me feel guilty when I can lie successfully. Um, and it's always something that I'm like, I'm lying because I'm embarrassed about something. Um, but I also, I mean, I kind of agree with Vesta that lying is a way to individuate. I mean, the first lies we tell are to our parents. And I think
Mhm.
that Vesta is talking about lying because she has been lied to a lot and has
Yeah.
never really investigated her own ability to lie and the freedoms she could have earned herself with those lies.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, she's not like, so this book happens like, present day, however we want to imagine it. And she's in her 70s, which makes her having like being older means that her experience of having been young was really different from, you know, I'm 40. So yeah, like I can imagine that if I had been born 30 years earlier, I probably would have been lying about different things, you know? So
Mhm.
I kind of liked imagining like Vesta as a character who felt like she had to perform some ideal of feminine perfection to a
Mhm.
certain extent. I mean, not like she was Marilyn Monroe. I mean, she was a woman who met her husband and got married, and basically, like, that was it. Like, she stayed home. Like, she had no life outside of her marriage, um, apart from her childhood. And like, I mean, I don't like imagining it, but I do like imagining it because I like imagining when I'm writing in first person narration, my character stuck inside herself with
Mhm.
no outlet but to be narrating. It's just kind of like a pressure cooker of psychology and feeling and experience that kind of like erupts into a fantasy, like lying, you know? And I think that's why, for me at least, like I find very oppressed people to be good storytellers or interesting storytellers.
Yeah, I love how interior this book is. Um, okay, so this book isn't exactly a noir. It's something much more interesting than that. It doesn't it doesn't start with an actual body. Of course, it starts with Vespa, like what you read from, finding a note alleging there's a body. But I am curious to know if you think Death in Her Hands is a noir, and if you like reading noir, and if so, what are other books that start with bodies that you like? Or if you think it really does have a project that's separate from that, or more slanted.
Hmm. Um, I'm not really sure I have read a noir book. Oh no, wait, that's not true. I read this book called, oh shit. Um, in a lonely place.
Uh-huh.
Which is I think from the 40s. Let me look it up. And it was actually set in LA, which is where I live. And in a lonely place. It's by Megan Abbott. Sorry, it's by Dorothy Hughes.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it's I mean, I don't know why. I think I just like read it because I heard somebody talking about it on the radio.
Mhm.
But one thing that like really stood out about the book was that it was so much about atmosphere, like
Uh-huh.
so much about creating this like very filmic environment where they're like you like the air is palpably textured, like whether it's like a mist or a dark vacuum or, you know, blinding. Like there's something about light um that I guess is definitive of a noir book.
Mhm.
And I guess I was thinking about that when I was working on Death in Her Hands, to the extent that I was imagining her environment as a place that was a character, that had the charge of transforming a mood. And that made a lot of sense to me because being this isolated with her dog, all she had is this lake, her little cabin,
Mhm.
and the woods.
Mhm.
So the woods as this sort of like, well, what you heard in the reading was about the birch woods, which is like a very different kind of environment than the pine woods. The birch woods are very light, you know, it's a pleasant place to go walking. And the pine woods are very closed and dark. It's a very, for me, a very like charged and masculine space. Um, so I thought about like, you know, that kind of thing. As for books starting with dead bodies, I don't remember the opening of this book, but I read it several years ago and it absolutely blew my mind. It's a novel called Being Dead by Jim Crace. Is that how you pronounce his name?
I don't know. I have to read it. I haven't read it.
Being Dead is amazing. It's like about these people who have died, and it just in their situation.
Oh, that.
And it's a novel.
Oh, wow. Reminds me, or the premise at least, a little bit of that Sheila Heti story.
Which one? Oh, oh,
Right?
the one about being dead.
Yes.
Yes, I actually I did like a podcast about that story. I loved that story.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, really funny. That's so funny because it's kind of the only Sheila Heti short story that I know. And you put your finger on it. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think about genre in a kind of a like maybe the way like painters might think of brands of paint.
Oh, I love
Like
that.
I don't really see it as the actual equation between material and creativity. It's just like a mood maybe, or like a style. It's like of packaging. I don't know.
That seems deeply true. Um, yeah, the setting is so much a character in Death in Her Hand. I mean, um, obviously the paperback is out, which is so exciting. The In the hardback, you had this interview with your mom interviewed you at the
Oh,
end,
yeah.
where you guys partially touched on the fact that you had vacationed as a child to a very similar place.
Hmm.
Um, so it seemed from that interview that you had an intimate relationship with this setting,
Hmm.
or had lived in some place similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, would you be interested in saying,
Yeah.
saying a little more about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just like to warn everybody, if you want to read that interview, you have to find like the book club edition. I don't think it was in every hardcover edition, but yeah. So I don't want anyone to be disappointed. Not that it's really all that interesting, but yeah, I needed something. First, I thought I was going to write an essay because there was this like demand for some sort of supplement to the novel. I was
Uh-huh.
like, well, I was like, why should I write an essay about my own book? Let me just talk to my mom, because I actually had never talked to my mom about my books before in any kind of formal way. Like I wasn't even sure if she had like read my books. I didn't know. I didn't know for sure. So in this case, she had to, and it was a little bit uncomfortable because my mother is nothing like Vesta, but the details of Vesta's life have an eerie similarity to my mother's. Um, and so we talked about that a bit. And it's true that probably the reason I set this where I did in a fictional town, but um, when I was like 17, my mom, in an interesting moment in the family dynamic, acquired this abandoned Girl Scouts camp on a lake near Bangor, Maine, which is like Stephen King country. And it really, I mean, he lives in Bangor. It's where he's from. You can like,
Oh, wow.
yeah. I mean, if you've ever read The Body, the story for Stand By Me, other things that like any place that feels like really rural, small towny, like it's Bangor. It is at like it. One of the scariest reading experiences of my childhood was reading it,
Mhm.
which terrified me. So then, 15 years later, now we're going to Bangor to, for our groceries, and coming back to this Girl Scouts camp on a lake surrounded by pine woods, and it is scary there. It's
Wow.
less scary now because there, 23 years later, there's a lot more people on motorboats and stuff. So yeah, I hope hey, you guys be quiet. Sorry, I knew my puppies were going to make noise. Shh. Can you please? So the I'm sorry. So the setting of the novel was definitely inspired by that location in Maine. I'm so sorry. Can you give me like 2 minutes or 30 seconds? 30 seconds. I'll be right back.
Whatever you need.
All right. Come on, you guys. Come.
I guess I can jump in here too.
Hey, Nick. You know what? This is a great time to remind our audience that post your questions in the YouTube chat.
It's absolutely true.
We will take a look at them in probably around like 15 minutes, but stew them up and write them down.
Absolutely. The book Being Dead that Ottessa mentioned is actually already posted in the chat. If you go in and you can go in and click that, it'll take you right to our website where you can check out the book if you like.
Wow, I can't wait to read. Yeah, buy and read.
Should be good. And also the Dark Tower. I'm a science fiction fantasy guy. The Dark Tower, one of Stephen King's books, also took place in Bangor, Maine. Or yeah, Maine. It's pretty cool. The strange last couple books that were extra strange.
Like a couple of years after my mom got this old Girl Scouts camp, an old couple that lived in the house next door, which is not really next door, but along the lake from her, drove out the dirt road onto what is really not a busy street at all. It's actually a really, really empty, like country road. And they pulled out and got hit by a semi and like immediately died. And soon after that, my dad had a boat, like a canoe accident. My dad, who thinks he can swim but cannot, and like was like treading water for a really long time and yelling, and like somebody came out of nowhere. And then I had a brother who had gone also canoeing and gotten lost somehow. I don't know how he got lost and ended up like in a completely different place, and had to like get someone to drive him home. And so that all, like, you know, things like that, like there was this very eerie experience where I fell asleep in one of the cabins by myself, and they're just like these simple it was literally a camp for Girl Scouts. I fell asleep and had like this horrifying dream, and when I woke up, the lights were on and I hadn't turned them on. Like the kind of things that happen in a place where you're kind of secretly wishing it's haunted. So you interpret everything as like an indication that there's some sort of nefarious energy like doing something to you. I knew I was going to write a book there. About it. I knew it.
It sounds horrifying. How many structures were there? Was it like a constellation of structures or one main structure?
There are 3 cabins that are all like a room on the water and then like a back room. And so I stayed in the last cabin, which was the most remote sort of. And there were weird, I would find like little weird things. Like there was this area I found that I think had probably been used for like dances and stuff. So it was like just a place in the woods that had been cleared and had like a canopy. I used to find like little things in the dirt, like bobby pins and buttons, and I don't know, maybe like some kind of crafting tool. I don't remember.
Girl Scout detritus.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is also truly horrifying. As if they just like evaporated mid jamboree. Oh yeah, I've never been up to Maine. It seems so stark and like Scandinavian looking and
Hmm.
haunting, just based on uh, photos, really, because that's all I have to go on. Um, okay, something else I wanted to ask you that I mentioned briefly before is that I was just like totally transfixed by this section in Death in Her Hands where Vespa goes to the public library and is searching for details about the murder online and mentions that she like took an online class. She's typing in questions on Ask Jeeves, which like spirals into this incredible self-reflection and delusion upon delusion, but also narrates how we like use the internet better than any other thing I've ever read. I was curious to know more about that section. I mean, the internet is obviously such a ridiculous and delusion encouraging mechanism in so many ways, but was curious maybe how you knew Vespa was going to reach Ask Jeeves, or maybe even how you think of that section in the book.
I don't remember how I got her to the library. I knew I needed her to go into the town, and figured as somebody who was married to an academic, you know, if you're looking for answers, you go to the library. But also, I think that's just the only place she kind of knew, because she would go to the library, and get books out of the library. And yes, she had taken a class on how to use a computer, so knew how to go online and ask Jeeves questions. And it just was like this instinctual thing that, you know, I'm writing what is like a kind of meta murder mystery, and I'm asking like, well, what is like, how do you solve a murder mystery? Like, how do you do that? And then I just decided Vesta was going to ask Jeeves how you solve a murder mystery. And then when I asked Jeeves, I'm not sure I really asked Jeeves, but I Googled, how do you solve a murder mystery? And the first thing that came up was how to write a murder mystery novel. And so I was like, oh, this is like exactly in the world of Vesta's mind, because she's writing in a sense as she's investigating. Like, she's writing a story in which she's the protagonist, sort of, but she is the author of her life in these moments, as she's like on an adventure to figure out who Magda was or how Magda died, all of that. I don't know, I mean, the internet, I remember when I was really young, I said something like, I will never put a computer in a story. And they were like, why? And I was like, well, it's so tacky. And
Yeah.
at the time, maybe it was like, but now I'm just like, there's only one way to write. It's like, if a character is living in contemporary society, I cannot not include technology. Like, if I do, it's making a really big deal about its absence, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is a character who isn't engaging in technology. So I mean, I'm kind of wanted to explore how weird it is for people who didn't grow up with it. Like, it is extremely strange.
Yeah. I feel like, yeah, maybe I feel like I I was right on the like my relationship to the internet is actually very similar to Vespa's. Like I couldn't use, I like began using it, like it became widely available in college, which is kind of too late to
Mm-hmm.
be a native. But
Mm-hmm.
I felt her, yeah, the way she goes into these questions and explores, just very, very relatable. Okay. Yeah, keep putting those questions in the chat if you have them. Maybe we'll start to pass them on to Ottessa around 4:45. Okay, another thing I was thinking about while reading Death in Her Hands was that you are such a careful observer of the world in so many ways, but I was really taken with some of your details about the way that women in, is it Beth's Maine?
Sure.
That, that women in Beth's Maine dress,
Mm-hmm.
and the way they present themselves physically.
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me of some sections in my year of rest and relaxations where you like nail down the aesthetic of the time period that book is set in so specifically. And yeah, I was interested in how maybe your like relationship to either clothes or physical presentation in writing, because you have very, very specific details. I'm thinking of like the snakeskin short pumps with pantyhose that someone is wearing at the library that Vesta's in.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm kind of, clothing is like one of my senses. And you probably can't tell, but like I have an enormous appetite for fashion in a lot of ways, and appreciate it a lot as something that describes a personality. Um, like generally speaking, when I'm not working or doing other stuff, if I'm just like procrastinating, like I'm watching fashion shows on YouTube, or like something like that.
Amazing.
Either that or like really horrible, like true crime-ish kind of stuff. Like I got on a major jag watching like interrogation videos.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I have to like cut that with some fashion once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, I mean, I don't even know how gendered it really is, but like what you wear as a woman like is laden with this heavy responsibility of like deciding how you want to present your
Yeah.
gender,
Yeah.
your genderedness, you
Yeah.
know? So
Completely.
it's like a bigger, because we can dress so many ways now that like, Magda, the way that Vesta imagines how Magda dresses feels really significant because she dresses in this like boyish kind of punk way.
Mm-hmm.
And like her tennis sneakers are like really dirty, but it like feels kind of cool, and that look is very different from the women in the grocery store who, Vesta is really super judgmental, like very snobby, and you can tell that she's been a little bit poisoned in her judgments, like through like weight and
Yeah.
class and you know I don't know, like she's got a lot of baggage. um so yeah, I mean, I think that there are times when a character's observation of the way that other people are dressing can say a lot about the way they imagine themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, everything you're saying is so true, and I feel like it's most visually evident maybe for me whenever I've been to a symphony concert where all of the men are all wearing like this same time-tested garb, which is like the tuxedo.
Hmm.
And then the women have like like some of them are in tube dresses, and it seems like this, and some of them are in men's suits, and it's like the variety is overwhelming, and almost, I guess, to see a group of women make such different decisions all at once to perform the same activity is kind of startling about how many more options there are. Yeah. So I only have a few more questions, and then maybe we'll let other people ask questions. What has it been like to bring this book out into the world? It's, oh my gosh, your 5th book, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
It has been different because this book came out during a pandemic.
Right.
The book was supposed to come out last April. I had a huge tour planned. I mean, not huge, but like significant. My life was going to be taken up by travel. And I had a lot of anxiety about that just because traveling's exhausting and being in public is weird. But also tours are also fun. Like you have a new experience every time. And I had been kind of like not nervous about how the book was going to be received, but sort of cynical about it. Like, oh, people want me to do like to one up myself from my year of rest and relaxation. Like they want another like snarky portrait that's like too cool for school or something. Like, I don't know. And I was like, well, I'm going to give them something kind of literary. They're not going to like it as much. And I think I'm right. Like, I think there are a lot of people who are probably like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Because it's such a book about writing. I've found that the people who have responded the most in a way that feels similar to my feelings about the book are other fiction writers. And so that's been interesting. So I didn't go on a tour, and the book got delayed, and then it came out in June or something, and I did some events online. And the pandemic just like completely blotted out whatever small professional experience I was having. I have like kind of weirdly complicated feelings about the book because I wrote it before Eileen, which was my first novel, came out. So it was an older book that has sort of resurfaced in my life, and I decided I wanted to try to publish it, and I did, which is really, really cool. And the UK paperback is this hot pink.
Love it.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can know. It's been a weird time for everybody, and for some of us worse than others. So to have something like a book come out is not anything to complain about. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's so many writers that I feel like publish books out of order. Like the publication date is kind of this weird, a weird timestamp that then lives with the book. But yeah, well, I'm obviously very excited to read your next, as I'm sure everyone is. Maybe we will start taking questions. I see in the chat there's a question from the wonderful artist Rel Robinson, who asks, do you find the process of writing cathartic or agonizing?
Thanks. I don't find it one or the other necessarily. I find it to be it's more saturnal than that. Like it feels like hard lessons to be won. And I'm mostly exercising my ability to surrender rather than like pulling my hair out. I know if I'm in agony, it's usually because I'm not supposed to be working on that right now. And if it's feeling too cathartic, it's not good. Like I'm just vomiting and not really being precise. Probably like it's not. I like writing never feels like I'm getting something off of my chest about me. It feels like I'm being outside of me, and that's why I like it. And so there's a lot of joy. There's like when I was writing short stories primarily, there was a lot of like humor and like laughing and like reading things back, and then feeling like an asshole for laughing at my own jokes. And you know, like all the narcissism that goes along with that, and then like having to deal with the fallout of that. So it's yes, it is cathartic at times because I feel like I'm rendering something that came to me in an abstract form and making it real. So that's sort of satisfying.
Yeah. Okay, then there's a question from Cusco Wright, who asks, would you, Ottessa, be willing to talk about any books you may be working on right now or thinking about writing?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Thanks for the question. I wrote a book during the COVID year, and that should be coming out next, I think in May, and it's called Lapvona,
Oh,
which is
so exciting.
thanks. Rita. It's about this village called Lapvona, which is a fictional place in Eastern Europe-ish, in the late Middle Ages-ish. And it's really about this cast of characters in this town over the course of a very strange year. And I'm excited about it. I'm excited to share it. And the book that I'm currently in a standstill with is a book that's requiring a lot of research, and I've had to take time off from it to do other projects. But it's been living with me for like 3 years, and it's called The Passenger. And it's narrated by a ghost upon her reawakening 100 years later after her death. And she's sort of like, it has some crossover with Death in Her Hands, because it is also a book sort of about storytelling itself. As a ghost, as a spirit, she realizes that in order to maintain consciousness, she needs to be actively remembering her life, or else she'll disappear. And again, so she's recounting her life, and the story of her life begins in Shanghai, takes her on this like very strange voyage across the ocean to San Francisco, where she has, I don't know, she gets into some trouble. So I'm looking forward to going back to that.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait. They both sound amazing.
Thanks, Rita. What about you? What have you got going on?
I've been working on a novel for a few years that I'm very hopeful is close to being done. It
Awesome.
like, you know, it looks like a novel, but it has some things that haven't revealed itself quite yet. Yeah, it's about a group of young girls that compete in a youth women's boxing tournament in Reno.
Oh my God.
We'll see.
Oh, that sounds so good. I love boxing.
Yeah, I do too.
Really?
Yeah, I love watching it. I've never boxed myself, but I do love watching it. And I've done a lot of other physical sports.
Mm-hmm.
It's been really fun to sit in that, and my memories of what it was like to compete physically. Um, one more question that I think I have the answer to, which was Shayla Imran asks, "What's the Sheila Heti story you guys mentioned?" And I think it is "My Life is a Joke."
Yes, that is it. Yeah.
So good. Yeah.
If you're feeling like too lazy to read it, if you go to the New Yorker podcasts and look up Sheila Heti, Ottessa Moshfegh, you can hear me read it and then have what is probably a not very enlightened conversation with Deborah Treisman about it. But yeah, it's a great story and very juicy.
Yeah. Ottessa, it has been so wonderful to be in conversation with you about Death in Her Hands. Everyone, be sure to pick up the paperback. Yeah, and do you think, unless there's anything else you think we missed, should we wave goodbye?
Yeah, let's adjourn. Rita, you have been so good to talk to. Happy to be here with you guys and Book Passage. Thank you everybody for tuning in.
Thanks again as well. Handing off. Anything that's was relayed in the chat that's just to the authors asking them to do something. I will relay them after the show. I promise. But thank you everybody for stopping on by. It's been absolutely a lovely time having you here. If you made it to both of our shows today, then one, thanks for sticking it out. That's a long gap between the shows, but I'm glad that you were here. And even if you just made it to one of them, I really appreciate you coming on by. Once again, the book is Death in Her Hands. You can find it at bookpassage.com, or you can just follow the blue link at the very top of the YouTube chat. If you'd like to check out our upcoming events, you can go to bookpassage.com/event or subscribe to the YouTube channel below and click the notification bell, and you'll get a heads up every time we go live. But either way, or whatever you do choose to do, thank you one last time for supporting us, for supporting authors like these two wonderful people here, for supporting books like our wonderful book tonight, and for supporting all of the independent bookstores all across the country. I know that while most of the people watching tonight are from the San Francisco Bay Area, many, many, many of you are from elsewhere in the world. So if you haven't yet, try to go out, find a local independent bookstore that's near you, and go say hi to them. We all tend to be pretty nice and like to talk to people behind the counter while we're reading books, and should definitely be shelving. Thank you again one last time for coming out tonight. Thank you, Ottessa. Thank you, Rita. And I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye.